Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. I'm Mark Owen. In this edition, a city of 11 million people, already 40% underwater because of global warming. We're heading to Jakarta, capital city of Indonesia, a country that can no longer afford to wait for environmental change. A radical call has been made to move the capital city some 1,500 kilometres away to the island of Borneo. Lucie Berbey is our reporter. Lucie, tell us about the work that's going on to try to rebuild a new capital city away from the rising seawater.
Absolutely. Right at this moment, there is a gigantic city being built from scratch on the island of Borneo in central Indonesia. This city, it's built on forest grounds that are currently used for industrial purposes, but the development of such a huge city in the island of Borneo is something that really preoccupies the local communities and the environmental activists. However, the idea of moving the Indonesian capital city is something that is not new, and it's a rather well-accepted idea throughout the country. The city of Jakarta is the fastest sinking city in the world. In the past 10 years, its northern areas, the coastal areas of the city, have sunk by 2.5 meters, and its inhabitants are already facing the consequences of sea level rising on a daily basis.
Lucie, stay with us. Thank you for that. Let's then go straight to the report by Lucie Berbey and Ulysse Cailloux.
This is the wall that separates my neighborhood from the sea. If it wasn't for this wall, the water would flood all our houses. I plan to leave Jakarta with my family and move to higher ground. But for the moment, I can't afford it. Even though we are well aware that Jakarta is sinking.
Muhammad Roni's survival depends on this wall, a 5-meter-high, 32-kilometer-long dike, which prevents the underprivileged districts of North Jakarta from being submerged by the ocean. Built on a delta, the Indonesian capital and its 11 million inhabitants are already facing the consequences of rising sea levels, and the megacity is slowly but surely drowning. The situation is particularly dreadful during monsoon season, when torrential rains hit Jakarta.
Akibat hujan deras, ratusan rumah di sejumlah kawasan di ibu kota terendam banjir hingga mencapai ketinggian 1 meter. Sebagian warga terpaksa mengungsi karena rumah mereka tergenang.
From the suburbs to the city center, these floods bring Jakarta to a standstill and torments the lives of its residents. But it's the coastal areas that are the most badly hit. The ground here has already alarmingly sunk below sea level and continues to sink at a rate of 25 centimeters per year along the coastline. A dramatic situation due to decades of unrestrained pumping of groundwater. Weakened by thousands of bore wells, the soil can no longer support the weight of the city.
Ya, Mas. Iya, Isi, Bu.
Ya, silakan, Pak. Ya.
Muhammad Roni grew up in this slum. 10,000 people live here, in a maze of cramped houses and streets that Muhammad Roni can navigate with perfection.
This is the shortcut to the seawall.
At 49, he was among the first to witness the rising waters in Jakarta. Today, he struggles to recognize the plains where he grew up.
Many of the memories I had when I was a child are gone now that the seawall is here. And the land on the other side is already flooded.
Muhammad Roni knows he's living on borrowed time. The wall, built only 5 years ago, is already showing some weaknesses. Locals have tried to fix the multiple cracks. In vain. Water is slowly gaining ground.
At first, there were no cracks. They appeared a few months after the wall was built and water started to seep in. Along with the other inhabitants, we are all worried when we can see the state of the wall. We think to ourselves that the strong pressure of the ocean could make this wall break at any time and flood the whole neighborhood. It frightens us a lot.
While the situation in Jakarta remains grim, Indonesian authorities have taken a radical decision. To build a whole new capital from scratch, here, on the island of Borneo. Once Indonesia's most preserved territory, 1,500 kilometers away from Jakarta. The construction has already begun. Officially, only forests that are currently used for the paper industry will be destroyed. 22,000 workers on site for a colossal project worth 33 billion euros. For the supervisor of the site, the conditions are ideal.
This region has little risk of natural disasters. There are few earthquakes or floods, unlike in Jakarta. It's also a great development opportunity for this region because the natural resources here are so vast.
And here is what the future capital city should look like. A state-of-art city with an abundance of green spaces and a focus on renewable energy. It will notably house the new presidential palace and eventually nearly 2 million inhabitants by 2035, mainly public officials and bureaucrats. This city has already been given a name, Nusantara, archipelago in Indonesian, a word meant to symbolize the unity of the country. But to get this new green capital out of ground, thousands of villages will have to be evicted.
See here, it has already started. We are constructing official buildings.
Yati Dalia was born here. Every day she watches the construction's progress. For her, the idea of a new city encroaching on these lands is unbearable.
We've been living on this land for a very long time, when there are no roads, and we had to cross rivers to get around when our villages had no electricity. And now they want to throw us out to make room for new inhabitants.
On the outskirts of this village, a water supply system for the future capital is under construction.
This is the dam they are building. See, it's very close to this traditional village.
Since the construction site is only a few meters away from the houses, 80 families will be evicted and will have to be relocated 200 kilometers from here, leaving behind their roots and their native land. Yati Dalia is far from the only one to be outraged by this project. Anger is brewing in the region. While at first the new capital brought hopes of development and employment for these villagers, their imminent eviction has made them lose all hope.
Our land is all we have. Our plantations and our houses will be destroyed. Where will we go? What will the lives of our children and grandchildren be like?
There's nothing we can do. I'm sorry, but this new capital does not make us proud or happy. On the contrary, it makes us depressed and anxious.
We are not against the government. We, indigenous people, do not want to fight the government. We just want them to listen.
The new capital city is a matter of concern throughout Borneo, especially for environmentalists. Palm oil production is already destroying large swathes of the forests, and dozens of species, such as orangutan, the symbol of Indonesia, are on the brink of extinction. Intensive palm oil production has decimated their habitats across the island of Borneo. The new capital city will threaten furthermore the island's already fragile ecosystem. This mangrove is 50 kilometres away from the construction site. Berbey has been supervising it for the last 23 years. But with nearby cities growing unrestrained, he's seen its surface area gradually diminish. He now fears that the new capital city will only exacerbate the situation.
This used to be a mangrove forest. It's since been converted into a port by the shipping industry.
The reason it is paramount to safeguard this forest is that they're home to endemic species only found on the island of Borneo.
Look over there. That's a troop of proboscis monkeys.
The population of these monkeys, with their distinctive noses, has been gradually declining over the past few years. There are only 150 left in the wild today. Berbey now fears that their habitat will further shrink with the influx of new inhabitants.
With the growing pressure of real estate, the mangroves could gradually be destroyed and be transformed into housing. This could dramatically reduce the forest area, and if those monkeys can no longer find food here, they'll become extinct.
For the slum dwellers of Jakarta, the cutting-edge new capital will be out of bounds. Muhammad Roni knows that he will not be among those relocated to Borneo.
Assalamualaikum. Gimana, Dek? Dagangan rame hari ini?
Ya, nggak terlalu rame sih, biasa aja.
Itu anak-anak.
In his house, where he runs a small grocery shop, the constant threat of floods looms. So to limit the risk, he's been forced to adapt.
This area was about 80 centimeters lower before.
And has started to raise the height of his entire house.
There are about 20 houses around here that have already been elevated.
But Muhammad Roni knows that this is only a temporary solution. In spite of his efforts, during the monsoon his house still gets flooded.
I'm still very afraid of flooding, especially if the wall gives way. If the cracks continue to grow bigger, our worst nightmare would come true. The whole neighborhood could be submerged in no time.
In North Jakarta, parts of this neighborhood have already been submerged, such as this mosque, slowly gnawed away by the waters.
I used to be happy living by the sea, seeing the waves and playing in the seawater. But as soon as I saw this wall and the rising water, I realized that my survival depended on this dike. Now I think this area is no longer fit for us to live in, because the sea level keeps getting higher. We can only take precautions and encourage the government to deal with this problem.
As per estimates, by the time the new Indonesian capital is completed in 2045, 1/3 of Jakarta could already be underwater.
Our reporter, Lucie Berbey, is still with us. Lucie, thank you so much for that insight into an alarming situation in Indonesia's capital. The rising seawater, what it's doing. One wonders how we actually ended up here and whether anything could possibly be done to save Jakarta.
Well, the main reason is most probably the illegal pumping of groundwater that have been taking place throughout the city for decades. Today, the groundwater tables, they are mostly empty and they cannot refill because the ground is almost entirely covered in waterproof concrete throughout Jakarta. Although you can imagine there are solutions being put into place to save Jakarta. One of them is the wall that you saw in our documentary. This wall is only a small piece of a larger project that should see by 2027 the construction of several dikes and of an artificial island in the bay of Jakarta. But this project it's not very convincing for everyone. Some experts are saying it's not tackling the real problem of sinking ground beneath Jakarta, and it's only offering a temporary short-term solution to its inhabitants.
Indeed, one might think that adding more concrete actually adds to the problem as well. The new capital, you've been there. When is it supposed to be ready for use?
Well, actually, the Indonesian president came to pay a visit to the construction site and the construction workers the day after we shot in Borneo. And during that visit, he claimed that the presidential palace will be fully operational by mid-2024. So that's only the first step, because the construction work is supposed to last until 2045. But the government is pretty optimistic about the development of this city. It will host up to 2 million people. It will host some schools, some hospitals, even football fields, which is a very popular sport in the country. And the president himself dreams of organizing the 2036 Olympics in Nusantara, in the new Indonesian capital. So this only goes to show how ambitious the government is for this new capital city.
Ambitious indeed, as you say, a new capital rising out of the depths of the one that is being left aside. Lucie, thank you very much indeed for joining us and for giving us that explanation. Lucie Berbey with our report. You can see it again via our website, france24.com. This is Reporters here on France 24. Do stay with us.